So over the last week or so I've been exploring this amazing piece of software, GRM Tools Atelier, and it does complex and weird really well, and it's great fun, and it completely suits what halFunusual gets up to. So I'm very excited by it. In working on the latest Naviar Haiku challenge, which was the Green Walnuts Haiku, I wanted to do something a little bit more rhythmic, a little bit more kind of conventional, I guess. And so I came up with this idea of you trying to get Atelier to do something, kind of more kind of driving. And so I came up with this, which is the kind of a generative patch for the Green Walnuts Haiku, and you can see that in another video. I also looked up the word atelier, which is a French word because this software is made in France, and it means workshop. So there is definitely something about this software that I find genuinely exciting and engaging, and it really is like being in a workshop in a sandpit. It's great fun. So I thought it might be a nice idea to have a look at this patch and just break it apart and see how it works, and not necessarily so that you can replicate it for yourself, although you could. It might be useful in other things you're doing in Atelier if you're playing with it, but also it might be useful in other pieces of software and other synth systems. So yeah, let's dive in. So this is the patch as it's running. It's looking after itself. It's doing some crazy stuff. So just to kind of break it apart into how it works, the main body of the sound, I'll just kind of stop that for a sec. The main body of the sound is actually from the GRM comb, the comb filter, and it's actually two combs, one on the left, one on the right. So you can see those two there, both set to exactly the same pitch. So you can only see one blob there. That's because they're on top of each other. And that's the basis of the sound, and that's kind of the heart of the patch, if you like. And obviously the rhythm is the other aspect that's the standout. So this modulator down here is kicking out a regular pulse of 5.666 hertz, and that's basically driving this generator, which just has one generator, and it's making it kick out a stream of pulses into the comb filter. So the only real reason for this oscillator is to generate the pulses, a little bit like a drumstick, I guess, hitting a membrane. So the comb filter is the membrane, and this is like the drumstick. So let's turn these off, and then just see what that first little bit kind of sounds like just on its own. So it's basically like a click, and so that's kind of what we're looking for. And it's, as I said, it's one generator, and you can see there that this modulator is driving the pitch, and it's also triggering this little impulse here, this little envelope. So, and this envelope is attached to the gain. So this is the envelope in the true sense of the word. It's the volume envelope. So we can change the timing of this envelope, and you can kind of hear more what it's doing. So you can hear the tone more there. But as I say, because the main sound is actually coming from the comb filter, we only really need a click. So the yellow modulator is driving the pitch as well, so it's causing a little bit of a pitch sweep. Now, obviously, if we wanted to, we could add a little bit of jitter to this and make it a little less regular. So we could easily get into weird territory, and obviously I'm very attracted to that. But I promise myself for this patch that I'd be very well behaved and stick to the general rhythm. So that's basically that first little section. So let's just open up the comb filter and see what that does to the sound. So as you can see, this is suddenly much more interesting. So you've still got a little bit of the click, so you've got a mix there, you've got a bit of the click, and then you've got this really interesting kind of comb filtering effect. And as you can see, I mean, this modulator is doing a lot of work, this blue modulator. So that's driving the pitch on the comb, and it's just kind of wobbling it around a little bit. You'll notice it's not very high, about 19.4%. About 94, exactly 19.4%, and that, so it's kind of wiggling the pitch around a little bit. It's also wiggling around the phase, it's wiggling around the warp, and it's wiggling around the damping. So there's quite a lot going on there, and because of the polyadic nature of this modulation system, the exciting thing is that it's wiggling it around, but it's wiggling around the two sides, the two combs, separately, and so there are different values being kicked out each time. So that's why the sound is so complex, and it's kind of, in my mind, it sounds a little bit folky. So it kind of sounds acoustic almost, like, even though it's clearly electronic, and I just find that really fascinating. So interestingly, this modulator is set to exactly the same kind of frequency as the other modulator. So this is literally just for adding a modulation in step with this system here. So that's the main body of that kind of like that kind of section. Just to show you what it's doing, let's decrease the damping a little, so you kind of hear that comb a little bit more clearly. And again, you know, all of these sounds are amazing and useful, so, you know, if you wanted something a little bit more like that, obviously you could have it. And so there's something really interesting for me though, and this is something I'm slightly addicted to, is that damping. I love that kind of boingy sound that it does when you get it really damped. It's a very special sound. It reminds me a little bit of the Vactrol sound that you get in some modular synths. So yeah, really lovely. I can't remember what that was, what values that was on now. So round about there-ish. So again, lots of modulation, kind of like, so even though we're only using 3 modules and some modulators, you've already got quite a complex kind of setup in terms of what's happening inside of everything. So maybe the most complicated kind of like section then after that is this final GRM gen, because what that's doing is adding a set of chords. So I'll just turn that on and you can hear what it's doing within the patch, and then I'll kind of break it apart a little bit and explain what it's doing. So this is much more recognisably the patch that you've already heard in the other video, and also for the Naviar challenge. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop everything. I'm going to just turn these off for a sec. and then turn this off, and then turn that off. And I'm actually going to decouple the modulation from these snapshots. I'll explain that in a sec. So basically, if I turn down, just lock that so that it's not being driven by the snapshots, which means we can start to hear what it's doing. And you'll notice that for each snapshot, there's a little set of notes that form a chord. And so what I'll do, I'll just here in post-production, I'll put the name, the kind of the notation for the chord, the name of the chord here, just so that it's covered. This isn't a music theory tutorial, so I'm not going to spend any real time kind of like analysing the chord structures, but just so that you know that it has a rationale behind it. Okay, so for each snapshot, it's actually a different chord, and so and you'll also notice that the sound changes a little. So if I just go back through those, we're on the 8th one at the moment, so you'll notice that these change with the snapshots as well. So the snapshots remember everything about what the module, the settings on the module. And what you do to save a snapshot is you control click. So I'm just clicking now. It's just a left click, but if you control click, then you save everything that the modules, all the module settings. And just to demonstrate how this works, if I just delete all of those notes, I've just kind of left clicked and dragged to there, and I'm just clicking delete. So they've all gone. So if you just click anywhere here, then you get a generator for every click, and it starts to distribute between left and right. So green and red are left and right. So there's a 4-note chord. This little button here forces each of those generators to sit back onto the closest semitone. So this will become a little bit more concordant. Once I press that, they won't that far out anyway. If we click this little hamburger here, we can see all 4 generators, and we can see each individual pitch. So each pitch has a frequency value and its corresponding note value. So I personally find the note value is more useful. Remembering that F2 is 8 to 7.31 hertz is not my idea of fun. So F2, C#3, C4, B4. So if we wanted to change this chord, the nice, so you can just use your mouse to drift the note up and down, and again you could use that little button to make it sit back onto a semitone, or you can just click and then just type in the note. So let's make that D3. There we go. And so let's make that F3. Let's make that A3, and let's make that D4. So now you've got a lovely D minor triad with the octave, and that was relatively easy to do. And then if I wanted to, I could control click onto one of the snapshots, and it'll remember that D minor chord. But I'm not going to do that because I've pre-programmed these with all of the chords that we wanted. So if I now click on 1, then we're back to the original chord. So the really nice function that I can't get enough of in this system, in the Atelier system, is the ability to, well, modulate anything actually, which is quite exciting, but to modulate this snapshot. So if we start in the middle, 4 or 5, and then let's just apply this modulation signal to it. Obviously we need to start it. We've got a really nice set of chords. So the idea behind the chords used was not to give a particular progression. What we wanted were chords that would kind of like sit within a chordal universe, if you like, and relate to each other quite nicely, even when they're playing randomly. So hopefully that was a reasonably successful attempt at doing that. And again, bear in mind that for each snapshot you've got the change in the sound as well for each one. Now down here you'll see the modulator, which is running at actually there's a relationship between those two, but I can't remember what it was. I'll put a little note in on the screen to remind me. So you'll notice that the picture of the waveform is slightly blocky, so that's to do with the ease function, and it's similar for this modulator here. So if you back off the ease function from 100%, it becomes much more wiggly, and you can hear the effect of that on the chord changes. So it's driving the chord changes between the snapshots with respect to that modulation signal. But what we want is much more of a flip between the chords. So that's why that ease function is where it is. And the other thing to bear in mind is this morph time over here. At the moment it's set to 146 milliseconds or so. So there's a little bit of a drift between each snapshot, and we can take that down to 0. So it just flips really clearly between each chord. Or we can raise this, and you can hear it start to really drift, and there'll come a point where the drift is so slow that it's slower than the swap overs between the switches between the snapshots, and so it just dribbles around. And again, you know, it's kind of in a different patch. That would be amazing. But for this patch, we want it to be kind of flipping around a little bit. So the only thing then to point out in terms of like how this patch works is that you'll notice that you're hearing this because I've turned down the follow. So if we turn follow to the maximum, then you can't hear anything. And that's because it's waiting for an audio signal from over here to feed into it, so that you start to hear more of these chords depending how loud the signal going into it is. So it follows the envelope of the of whatever's being fed into it. So let's start all this up again, and then turn on our click and our comb, and you can start to hear the following there. In fact, if we take the comb off again, and then we play with this, you start to hear those chords in a slightly different way. Let's stick the comb back on. And there we have the patch, all broken up and explained. Hopefully it makes more sense now why it's doing what it's doing. Why it looks so remarkably simple for such a complex sound. And basically why Atelier is so amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful. I'm more than happy to do more. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.